Okay, so Mavis Staples, before she starts singing Eyes on the Prize in her live album Hope at the Hideout, says, "We've come here tonight to bring you some joy, happiness, inspiration, and some positive vibrations. And we want to leave you enough to last you for the next 6 months." And seeing your play was like that for me.
Oh, bless you.
It really was. It's like I've been hyped for like 4 months straight.
You just won my heart just by quoting Mavis Staples. My goodness, how great.
I was listening to the album recently and I was like, that is what Hamilton is like for me. Like, it just gave me, I don't know, just like energy and hope and nourishment for just ever since I saw it. So it completely blew me away, and that's what great art, I believe, should do. So it's been like this phenomenon in my life. Anyway, I'm going to stop fangirling on you, but
please don't.
No. Okay, I'll sustain it a little bit. But
we'll keep it going.
We were doing this thing with the Public Theatre, and we were in New York for
the Great Oscar Eustace.
Yes. And for International Women's Day, and so it just seemed perfect to talk to you about the play. So thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So for those of us that aren't lucky enough to be in New York here to see the play, and it's almost impossible to get a ticket at the moment, could you give us like a 30 seconds, like highlight reel synopsis?
Yeah, sure. Hamilton is the story of our nation's first Treasury Secretary, and it's as sexy as it sounds.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow.
It's about Alexander Hamilton. He's the dude on the $10 bill who had an amazing, tumultuous, unlikely American life. And I knew nothing about him until I picked up Ron Chernow's biography of him one day on vacation, and just felt like it was the proto-American immigrant story. Before there was an America, this guy sort of came here for a better life and managed to make one. It's also, in a weird way, a love letter to writers. This is a guy who wrote his way out of his circumstances, wrote his way into power, and also wrote his way to ruin, blew up his own spot, and caught beef with all the other founding fathers. And the music I use is all the music I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
So it's hip-hop music, and it's R&B music, and it's Beatlesque music for King George.
Yeah.
But it's our goal is to eliminate any distance between a contemporary audience and this story that happened over 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why people are so psyched about Hamilton, is that you just kind of blast through every expectation and tradition. You know, you use music that would be seemingly incongruous with the time, but that is so perfect as a way to express these ideas. And
structurally, I steal a little bit from Harry Potter, I have to tell you.
What?
Because the opening scene, Hamilton meets Aaron Burr, and he says, Aaron Burr, like, help me, like, I want to be in this world. And Burr gives him the opposite advice of who he is. And then he meets his real friends, Mulligan, Lafayette, and Laurens, and it's exactly Harry Potter meeting Malfoy first, and then seeing his real friends on the train, being I like these guys better.
I completely forgot that, because in the first book, Draco tries to be like, you know, I can help you.
I can help you.
Like,
just
tries to befriend
consort with
him,
the right people.
And Harry has this instinctual, like, this guy is clearly an asshole, and I have to.
Yeah, everything I learned from those books.
Yes, this is great. Harry Potter's everywhere. It's the ultimate universal story. Okay, good. So you wrote this play, which is set how many years ago now?
He was born in 1755. We go all the way through his life till his death in 1804.
Told with contemporary music, with all different kinds of music. But it's also been there's been this amazing response to it, because you cast a multi-racial cast in the roles of, you know, who would traditionally have been white men. So I'm really interested. You kind of really have broken the mold. Did this just kind of like flow naturally from you as a person and an artist, or was this
it happened very organically.
Or?
You know, I got to this end of the second chapter in this book. I get to the part where he literally writes an essay and gets himself out of the Caribbean. And I said, this is a hip-hop story. So even in my first read-through of the biography, I was casting hip-hop and R&B artists in my head. I was never picturing the literal founding fathers. We know what they look like. It takes exactly no research to find out what the founding fathers actually look like. You just open your wallet.
Right.
So the fun for me was in, all right, well, which R&B artist, hip-hop artist, music artist has the feel of the temperament. So, with George Washington, I was thinking about Common, and I was thinking about John Legend, and that's actually a pretty good description of Chris Jackson, who plays him. When I read the name Hercules Mulligan, I thought that's the most Busta Rhymesian sounding rapper name. It is such a great name.
So good.
So I wrote it as if Busta Rhymes was in my head. And so Tommy Kail just sort of took that and extended it and really said, this conceit just allows us to eliminate the distance even more. Because if it doesn't look like a John Trumbull painting from the 1700s, then we can find our way into it in a way that makes it much more accessible than if it was just sort of a period piece.
Totally. Well, again, that was what was so cool is that, set hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but I kept seeing our time's topical issues that I was seeing in the news.
Right.
Just so reflected in what I was seeing on stage.
And that's what I fell in love with when I was writing it too. I was like, we've been fighting about the same things forever. It's no accident that we're still fighting about how much is the government involved in our lives, which is what Jefferson and Hamilton rap battle about in my show.
Yeah.
It's no accident we still fight about how involved do we get in the other countries' affairs, which is, in our rap battle, it's the French Revolution,
do you get involved in the French Revolution
but is still just applicable to any foreign venture the United States has, and it's also no accident that. Everyone who dies in our play dies as a result of gun violence. That's the other thing that is in the founding of our Constitution that we can't seem to get right.
Yeah.
But is, plagues even our show, much less our country.
Yeah, and also who's an American, who gets to live here, who's a true American, what does that mean?
Absolutely.
All of that stuff, I was like, wow, this has everything.
Yeah. Jefferson was using immigrant as a way of denigrating Hamilton way before Trump ever entered the scene.
Came anywhere near any of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's so great. It's difficult for me, obviously, not to look at it through the lens of HeForShe and the work that I'm doing, and Angelica and Eliza and the sisters are clearly amazing for that. I'm trying to find. So she says. Angelica raps, you want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I will compel him to include women in the sequel.
Work.
It's so good. I love it so much.
I just pictured a million teenagers making gifs of that moment.
Me rapping? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, God.
It's the best.
I'm so not a rapper, but it makes me want to learn to do it because she's so badass and it's such an amazing way to express ideas.
Yeah, and I think one of the sort of the things that Ron writes about in his book that I sort of expand in the show is this notion that if Angelica Schuyler lived in a different time, she'd be one of our founders.
Totally.
And she meets everyone who met Hamilton and Angelica together thought, well, they're the married couple, right? Because they were so
soulmates.
They were intellectual soulmates.
Yeah.
And the letters they write back and forth. I mean, she's desperate for news. She's in London, and she married a rich British banker, moved to London, and her letters she actually also corresponded with Jefferson.
Really?
Yeah, and it's actually pretty amazing because Jefferson's trying to flirt with her, and she's not having it. He's like, he's in Paris while she's in London, and he's writing her this letter to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, he's like, yeah, we should go to America together. We could take the boat over together. And Angelica goes, oh yeah, that sounds really nice, except there's my loyalties lie elsewhere, basically. She's like, hashtag Team Hamilton.
Hashtag I'm on somebody else's team.
So she did meet Jefferson.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so cool. So I'm interested though, because you've included these really political things in your play, and I'm interested, do you think that storytellers have a responsibility to drive us forward as a society, to encourage us to perceive things in new ways? And if you do, does this ever weigh heavily on you? Do you ever feel like that's a responsibility?
No, I'll tell you the way I think of it. I think storytellers can't help it. Your worldview affects what you see in the work, and it affects what you make.
Right.
Anything that's political in Hamilton's story is inherent in Hamilton's story, at least the way I know how to tell it.
Yeah.
And so I think the notion of Hamilton as an immigrant story, maybe another writer would not have seized on that as the through line. That was definitely my way in.
Yeah.
Having parents who were not immigrants, they were born in Puerto Rico. They came to New York. My dad didn't speak a word of English when he came here, and he came here to get a better life. So I'm familiar with that story, that immigrant narrative of like, we're going to come here and we're going to do the jobs no one else wants to do, and we're going to work twice as hard. And I recognize that in Hamilton. So that's what comes out when I write him. Someone else may have a totally different version, but I really try not to think of writing as a burden at all. My job's to fall in love, because it's got to sustain me. This show took 6-7 years to write. It's got to sustain me for 6-7 years. And so, the politics inherent to the show are just what come out of me when I write about this thing. And it's also, but it's really about being inspired and being in love. Like, there are a million biopic, biomusical worthy subjects, but if I don't know the way to tell it, I can't tell it. So if it starts to feel like a responsibility and it feels like homework, I mean, I know you love homework.
I love homework.
I don't love homework. I need it to feel like a love affair. It can't feel like homework to me.
No.
But that's sort of how I approach it.
So kind of what you're saying is that art is just incredibly personal. It's just like everyone will read the same thing a different way, will experience it differently.
And I think the ultimate way in which art can be political is that I think it engenders empathy, which is the thing that politicians can't seem to do.
They can't do.
If you feel like you know someone because you've spent 2 hours chronicling their life in a story, or you've seen some movie that gets you under their skin and in their heart, you can't dismiss them as other anymore.
No,
do you know what I mean?
It's so true. I talked about this yesterday when I was talking to Forrest Whitaker, just saying that like, once you've seen a movie that has just opened you up to somebody else or in a different perspective, you can't unsee it.
That's right.
That's it. You're done. You're changed forever. You can't go back. You're changed. Yeah. And that's what's so amazing about art and movies and plays and things. So, still on the topic of just awesome womenness, Renee did this awesome rap, which I know that you co-wrote for the BET Hip Hop Awards cypher.
Wasn't she incredible?
It was so good.
Yeah, she's the best.
So she said, I came to represent the ladies of our history. We know the founding fathers, but the mothers are a mystery.
That's right.
So, in your play, it's really interesting because Eliza chooses to erase herself from the narrative when she discovers Alexander's affair. But a lot of women just have been erased from history, where often, you'll read quotes that's like anonymous. And normally that was a woman, or we've seen so many women have to write under pseudonyms, under male names. Even Jo Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, insisted, or
those great Cormoran Strike books, they're so good.
I know, so good, but said she wanted to be JK because there's so many kind of like irritating things that hold women back when they become a female writer or a women writer or whatever that even means. So I'm really interested, how do you think that women and men can reclaim women's history and the narratives and perspectives of women? And you did this in Hamilton. You essentially had to create these stories for women because there's just less.
Yeah, there's not a definitive Pulitzer-winning Schuyler sisters biography.
No.
There isn't. We had to go. I had to go and do the research, and I relied on Ron a lot. And to me, one of the most moving things about Hamilton's story is that it is cradled by his wife's story. Yeah. She's the one who brings it to us.
Yes.
And the last chapter of Ron's book is about her incredible life and how much she accomplished. She established the first private orphanage, which still exists in the form of the Graham Windham organization, which helps foster kids into adulthood, and ran it for 27 years. And if you had put that in a screenplay, people would be like, it's too on the nose. You can't have the widow of the orphan establish an orphanage. It's crazy. Except it really happened, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful. The other thing that's really tragic is she really, she had 7 kids besides Philip, who passed away.
Wow.
And she really tried to get one of them to write her husband's life story, and she passed away before it happened. One of her sons eventually did complete it, but I also feel for the kids. He left behind so much writing. It's like, how do you begin to make sense of it? But, that was her thing, was please tell my husband's story. She was so selfless in that way that women are so often asked to be and so often assume, as opposed to my story being told, as opposed to the woman's story being told. But I found her story incredibly moving. That's why we end with her.
Yeah, which is great. And it's so true. I think there's this perception that women are inherently, biologically more selfless and giving, and we just do that because we're women and that's how we are, which is such a shame, because A, we don't get the credit that we deserve as human beings for being so courageous and doing that.
Absolutely.
And B, it just like, it removes the decision, it removes the agency out of it. It takes the choice.
Yeah, I feel really lucky. I grew up in a house with really strong women. My mom's a psychologist. She was a teacher. She was getting her master's when I was born, and then she's a psychologist. And she was, she had a private practice in our house. So it was like, mom's working, we have to sneak around the patients and like go home. And my wife is the same way. My wife was a scientist when we started dating, got bored of being a scientist, and then went to law school while Heights was happening. Now
so
she's a lawyer.
Dumb then.
Yeah, she's the brains of the outfit. Actually, yeah,
that's
I'm slumming it.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
So that's. I mean, I say that to say that like that thing of women are encouraging, or like that was never my experience as a kid. It was just, they were just getting shit done.
just getting so much shit done.
Yeah, that was just the thing.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you're married to like a scientist. That's super cool.
I told her to go right to med school from law school. Just like get the trifecta.
Just why not?
Yeah, just be the scientist, lawyer, doctor.
Oh, wow.
She was like, the last one takes too long.
Yeah, it's so true. That one takes forever. Okay, so speaking of awesome women, which female storytellers really have inspired you? Oh,
so many. Even in just the musical theater genre alone, there are so many incredible examples. I think of my friend Janine Tesori, who's the composer of Fun Home, which is an unbelievable show. If you haven't seen that, go see that.
Yes.
Go see that.
It was part of our HeForShe Arts Week. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, cool. And it's really, and in addition to just being an incredible, like, that's a story that you would think. People always go, oh, a musical about a founding father. Oh, a musical about a lesbian cartoonist. Like, no, it's actually the perfect form for it. And she's she and her co-writer Lisa really unlocked that. So she's a huge. She's one of my heroes. I think of Lizzie Swados, who passed away, who is the composer, who, by the way, was writing hip-hop in 1978 for Broadway with a musical called Runaways, which she wrote all the music, lyrics, books, and directed. And so she's one of my big heroes in the theater scene. And then, I think of, God, I mean, I'm thinking of all, like, the young authors growing, like, I'm thinking of Beverly Cleary, and I'm thinking of Madeline L'Engle, and I'm thinking of, Judy Blume, and I'm thinking of all these incredible, and J.K., of course, the women who raised my brain.
Yes.
Because those were my books. Those were just my books growing up.
That's awesome. Speaking of books and, things that changed your brain, it's impossible for me to look over the fact that Hamilton focuses so much on the importance of education, teaching yourself, the power of education, the power of writing. Was there something that really drew you to Hamilton?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a love letter to writers and being able to really change your life with writing. That's what Hamilton did.
Yeah.
One of the first letters we have is a letter to his friend Ned Stevens. He's 14 years old, and he's talking about how miserable he is. He's working for a trading company. He's basically running a trading company because the owners are on ships. They're sailing around, and he says. I may be said to be building castles in the air, but we have seen such schemes successful when the projector is constant. I shall conclude.
For me, this was a huge problem watching your play. It's just that like words just like get me. It's like
I mean, we have seen such schemes successful when the projector is constant. I mean, knock me out. And then he says,
and hang on a minute, whoa, rewind. How old is he when he wrote
14 years old.
No, this isn't fair.
14 years old.
14?
Yeah, and then
So he's like a
he's a prodigy.
Like a genius.
Yeah.
He's like a prodigy.
And literally wrote his way out. And he concludes that letter by saying, I shall conclude by saying that I wish there was a war. Because he knew he didn't have money and he didn't have family. He knew the only way for him to rise in society was to gain military glory.
Was for things to get mixed up.
Yeah, things to get mixed up and for him to be able to, but also like the valor, the sort of acclaim that comes with winning a military victory. He said, I'll either die virtuously on the battlefield, and I think he had a lot of teen martyrdom fantasies about that.
Right.
But if that doesn't happen, I'll have had a command and I can rise up. And the whole time he's working for Washington, he's like, I don't want to be your secretary. I want to be fighting. Like he's the only one on best job at the war, like not fighting, writing, doing the thing he's best at. And he's like, please let me fight. Please let me fight. Please let me fight. Please let me fight.
So interesting. And do you think that's because there's this idea around like, as a man, that's just like the ultimate glory, even though he clearly has the most amazing brain of anyone ever.
Yeah.
Ultimately being a fighter is like...
Yeah, I think he was accustomed to that, but I think he really understood. I think it was his survival like instinct was super crazy good, and he was just like, if I leave here just having been a secretary, that doesn't get me anything. And I don't have anything.
And do you think that's also the idea of sacrifice, of what he was of the idea of sacrifice, of what he was willing to do for his country, and then he wanted to show how much he was willing to die for his beliefs, to die for this idea.
Absolutely. And you see that borne out again and again. You see him take on unpopular opinions. You see him take on other popular, it's all about being the crusader. He's a crusader.
Yes.
Whether it's with himself during the war or with his ideas when he's defending the Constitution, whether he's fighting with Jefferson over what the government should do. Yeah. I'm right.
Yeah.
And one of the first letters he has a letter to John Laurens where he says he's talking about he says, I need you to find me a wife. And it's kind of a crazy letter. He goes, I need you to find me a wife. She should be pretty but not too pretty. It's very like bro. It's a very bro letter.
Bro-y letter.
Yeah. He goes, she needs to be pretty, not too pretty that I have to like worry about it. Basically, I'm paraphrasing. And then he says, and as to her political opinions, doesn't matter what they are, I will convince her to mine.
This is Hamilton who says this?
This is Hamilton who says this.
I'm liking him less now.
Yes, I'm sorry. But that's a real letter. Yeah, but that's also speaks to his arrogance. I was so seduced. You were seduced by schemes.
Moments ago. Yeah.
Your fave is problematic.
So well, and now
they're all problematic.
I know, people are problematic. That's the difficulty.
It's true.
So basically because he was just so focused on his political aspirations, he kind of just needed a wife who he could just like...
Well, he also said, I need her to have money because I don't have any. That was another thing he said in the letter.
Oh my god. Well, actually, I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of a gender reversal in the sense that we always think it's, a woman at that period of time who would have been looking to marry a wealthy man.
That's true.
Whereas this is kind of the inverse of that.
Yes. And he writes her actually really hard. There's one of the last letters before they get married is this very, I might win you back with this one.
Oh, really?
He basically says, there's a lyric in the show, will you relish being a poor man's wife? That's from this letter. He says, do you soberly relish the pleasure of being a poor man's wife? And he basically says, if you marry me, like, it might, like, you might be really broke. You come from money, and he says, like, don't have any illusions of like being in a field with garlands in your hair. Like, that's not what being broke is like.
No.
Being broke sucks.
It's horrible.
And if you are prepared to live that life, then we can get married because I think I'm going to do great. And then you'll just be happily surprised if we end up having money. But he really preps her. He's like,
well, he doesn't try and con her.
He doesn't try to con her. He really it's a very, there's the arrogant letter to Laurens, which is like, get me a wife. And then there's this letter, which is like, don't marry me because if you don't think you can be happy poor.
Yeah.
So it's that bedrock of arrogance and insecurity that I think makes him so relatable. He's in 1 minute, he's like, I'll convince her. And 1 minute he's like,
oh my God, am I
you like me for real though?
Yeah, do you really like me for real? Yeah, no, I think Hamilton's most compelling moments for me are always these moments when he makes decisions to courageously be authentic and truthful, even though it costs him.
Yes.
And even though that letter could have cost him Eliza, potentially.
Right.
She could have been like, oh, I thought you were poor, but not that poor. Actually, maybe I'm not so into this anymore. So did Hamilton just like read everything he get his hands on?
Yes.
That's how he self-educated.
Yeah, he self-educated.
Just read everything
he actually had a teacher on the island. I'm fuzzy on it because I haven't read it in so long. But he actually went to a Hebrew school on the island, so that was some of his early education on the island. Then he came here with the hopes of being a doctor. He applied to what would become Princeton, but asked to like accelerate his studies, and they said no.
Right.
That's what we reference in that opening song.
Yeah.
And Burr actually did go through Princeton in like 2 years when he was like 13 years old, but his dad was president of Princeton.
So that's gonna be helpful.
Again,
in that...
Malfoy,
Yes.
Harry Potter. But
Seriously.
so he went to a school that would allow him to study faster because he also felt behind. He sort of like landed here behind. So he was like,
catch up.
I'm smart. Can I graduate faster, please?
Yeah. Let me just get this over with. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, but the importance of education it was so key for him. Even during the war, he's reading books on monetary policy in the event that we win the war. Because one of the things he learned, and this was actually a song I cut from the show, there was a song called Valley Forge I cut where he just talks about how their money's worthless because the British money is worth something and America bucks aren't a thing because they're colonies.
Yeah.
And so the irony of them fighting for American independence while the British soldiers can afford supplies and food and lodging and the Americans can't.
Right.
Because their money's worthless. So it hurt me to cut that song for the simple reason that monetary policy is not an abstract thing for Hamilton. He almost died. They almost starved to death. There were untold American casualties that winter because they were starving and they were freezing. It wasn't because of fighting. No one was fighting.
Right, they were just dying.
Yeah, they were just in a field freezing to death. And so having money that's worth something is actually a life or death thing in his brain.
Yeah.
So when Jefferson is like, this pamphlet, thing's
who
too
cares?
long.
Yeah, who cares about financial
We just want to be
policy?
farmers. And he's
so
like,
boring.
you will care.
You will care because it might mean that you make it or you don't.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So to switch topics slightly, so obviously you've been asked by lots of different members of the media and journalists about gender blind casting for Hamilton, and you've said that you'd be down, other than that it'd be difficult to change some of the vocal ranges on some of the songs, but conceptually you like the idea.
Absolutely.
And
I think there's going to be so many Lady Hamiltons once this thing is in schools and in regional productions, and that's great. Like, again, I do theater because I fell in love with being in the school play in high school.
Yeah.
And I also remember the inherent unfairness. I remember directing West Side Story and girls trying out in a 9-to-1 ratio and being like, this sucks.
Yeah.
This sucks that like there's 2 great girl parts.
And
this show's a masterpiece and that's why I'm directing it, but like this sucks.
Yeah.
So, when Heights started getting released to school groups, and I started meeting people from all girls schools who were like, I was Usnavi, like girls being like, I was Usnavi. I'd be like, that's awesome. So that's going to go Genderblind into the world, because we want this to be the best school play ever.
Yeah.
And we want the people who want to do it to do it.
Yes.
And the other thing that I kind of continue to think about, and I have time to think about it, is finding ways to take the sort of really color conscious casting we've done and extend that into the school life, because it's so easy for a drama teacher to sort of just cast the kids who always audition, which aren't always the kids of color at school.
Yeah.
Because there aren't parts for them, and so they think, why am I going to be in My Fair Lady?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm interested. So I didn't know this about you. I was researching for this interview. You worked on West Side Story. Mm-hmm. You translated it into Spanish.
Yeah, I translated the sharks into Spanish. Yeah, that was pretty fun. And I wouldn't have done it if the original creators weren't involved. It was Arthur Lawrence.
It was Sondheim, yeah.
Arthur Lawrence and Sondheim, and it was Lawrence's pitch. He was very passionate about it. And so it was fun, but it was interesting. Like it only worked so well in terms of audiences. I always think of West Side Story as kind of the best musical. Like it really is like
No, it's amazing.
it's the most perfect synthesis of music and lyric and dance all sort of coalescing. And so I thought audiences will just go with us because they know how I Feel Pretty goes in English. So what is it like if it's in Spanish? But there was a lot of pushback.
Really?
Yeah, and the producers actually put back a lot of the English that I had translated because it's one thing, you know, within the Heights we don't think twice about it to go back and forth between Spanish and English because it was built into it originally. Right. But messing with a classic comes with its own sort of pitfalls. And so people really pushed back. There were people who really liked it. And there were people who were like, can you just sing I Feel Pretty? Like, I love I Feel Pretty.
Yeah,
so I sort of learned the lesson of like messing with a classic. Even though I had the blessing and was working with sort of the creators of the thing, it was an interesting experience.
So you worked on West Side Story, you worked on In the Heights, which I absolutely loved that musical too. Yes, and you just wrote music for the new Star Wars. So you've worked on so many different kinds of things, and I'm interested when I look at those pieces that you've dabbled in as a theme, like masculinity and what that really means seems to connect a lot of the pieces.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess you're right.
Look at that. Oh, I love it. I'm telling Lin-Manuel something new about his work. That makes me super happy. So I'm interested, within different cultures, do you see, like, perceptions of masculinity and what being a man should be? Do you see it differently within different cultures?
And sometimes it's funny what they are. Like, I remember, you know, I was a vegetarian until I was about 13 years old.
No way.
Not for any political reasons.
Right.
It was a tactile thing. I didn't like the feel of chicken. I just didn't like it. And so my parents both ate meat, and they were like, all right, we got to get protein in you another way. And so I ate a lot of eggs, which I didn't mind, and I ate a lot of fish sticks covered in ketchup, I guess. But then puberty hit, and like a switch flipped, and I went, oh, meat's great. I don't know what happened. It was really biological, but I will tell you, my very old school Puerto Rican grandfather kind of looked at me like my whole childhood was like, he doesn't eat meat.
He's
I'm
not
worried
a real
about
man.
him. He's not a real man. Like, I'm worried about him, and he doesn't eat meat. That somehow was the marker of manhood.
Interesting, though.
And then I started eating meat. I had my first filet of mignon with him at the Ponderosa Steakhouse in Puerto Rico, and he was like, oh.
And you got male approval.
Yes.
You got to sit in the man box.
And I was like, what the hell does meat have to do with anything? But in Puerto Rican culture, I learned as a child,
unless
man, meat
you're
equals
not a
manhood.
man.
Yeah, so that's like one weird sort of quirky one that I experienced firsthand.
That's really interesting, because I have guy friends who are very environmentally conscious, and there's so much talk at the moment right now about the fact that red meat is such a big contributor to greenhouse gas. It's like the number one, bigger than anything else. So if we just ate less red meat, we would instantly kind of reduce emissions. But for him, even though he's like super into this stuff, he's like, I'm a man. I eat red meat. I can't divorce the two.
I've never understood the meat man.
Me neither.
Correlation.
It's very confusing.
I know a lot of ladies who really like meat.
Yeah.
It's just delicious.
Yeah.
And like, it's so funny that's become
a thing.
I don't know what that's a holdover from, but
maybe,
it's a thing.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so that's
and then also, the other thing is like, I'm a straight guy who writes musicals,
yes.
Which is
that's interesting. Do people think that you have to be gay to write a musical? Is that like, have you ever heard that?
Yes, it's a little bit like being a white NBA player. I'm not sure why that is. One, boys who like girls, you're missing out if you don't audition for the school play. There's lots of girls at the school play. Also, boys who like boys also audition for the school play.
Yes, everyone
should audition for the school play.
Yeah.
It's to me, that's what sort of changed my life and made me figure out who I am for many reasons. I think when you're in high school, there's so much live or die drama in your grade.
Yes.
Like, oh, this person likes this person's not talking to this person, and it feels like the most high stakes stuff in the world. And that's only been intensified by social media.
Yeah.
And for me, doing the school play meant I had friends in other grades. I'm like, oh, it's getting temperature's getting a little high in my hallway. I'm going to go hang out with my friends who are seniors who are in the play. And you have a little heartbreak when your friends graduate before you do, but you also it also gives you perspective on school in a way that lets you sit outside it.
That's so true. My favorite experience from being at Brown was I did a student production of Chekhov's Three Sisters.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was like you form such different friendships and relationships with people that you have to be vulnerable with like that and put yourself out there, and like those friendships in that period of time was very meaningful.
It meant the most to me when Heights started getting done by high schools, because I was like, oh, there's a generation of people who got their first kisses, Benny and Nina. There's a generation of salon ladies who are going to be best friends for life.
Forever, because of this.
Yeah, and that's really, like, by doing it is really, that's how I fell in love with theater. It's by doing it.
Yeah, totally. I have to talk about the moment in the play that just destroyed me. I mean, I was like, just could not stop crying. I was such a mess. So it was Dirtier Dojo, which is where two men sit on stage and sing essentially this incredibly tender love song to their children, and they talk about what being a father means to them, how it was so much more than or beyond what they had even expected, and I guess in the midst of all the politics and the bloodshed and whatever else, this just really felt like the heart of the play for me.
Yeah.
And it felt like a very unusual portrayal. I feel like I very rarely see men in plays and in movies talk emotionally about what being a father like means to them.
I think it's compounded by the fact that neither of these men grew up with their fathers.
Right.
You know, so it's these guys, you know, to me the line that kind of wrecked me while I was writing was, my father wasn't around, I swear that I'll be around for you.
It kills me.
Because that's whether you grew up with your parents or not,
I think so many people
you aim to fix, you aim to fix whatever your childhood wasn't, and you make mistakes of your own, and you're destined to. It's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that notion of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do my best is, you know, that's what broke my heart in the writing of that. That was sort of finding, you know, I found my way to that song because I realized both these guys had kids at the same time, and both these guys don't have a father to relate their experience to.
Right.
And so that was immensely, it also, you know, it came at a very weird time in my life. I wrote that song. People always go, oh, you wrote that song for your child. No, I wrote that song 3 years before I had a kid. You know, sometimes there's just those weeks where everything in your life changes. I've never told this story before. I was on vacation in the Dominican Republic. I was with my wife's family. My wife's aunt was in the final stages of ALS, which is, you know, incurable and so far. And we were just kind of waiting for the news to hit. She lives in Austria. And so it was a vacation, but it was also, we had this news that was hanging over us. Right. And so the family was very tense and trying to make the best out of a vacation. At the same time all this happened, this tiny stray puppy jumped on my wife's beach chair, licked her ankle, and gave her these pleading eyes. My wife is a lifelong cat person and like changed teams in that moment. Oh no! And was like, oh no! Oh no!
Oh no! I really want a puppy.
Oh, I want this puppy. And we said, all right, well, if it comes back tomorrow, it's ours, because it played with us all day, followed us around all day. Let it go. Came back with a sister.
Oh no! Oh no! So now
next day, that day, Vanessa's aunt passes away. Vanessa's, you know, we're all distraught and we're crying, and you know, Vanessa's mother, who has just lost her sister, and we have these two sister puppies that we're taking care of, and we're like, well, they're coming home with us, and so we brought the puppies home. We found a home for the sister. We kept Toby, which is Spanish for ankle. And in that week, I wrote Dirtier Dojo. It was like the calm in my life. Like my life was a weird storm, and that was the calm in my life, was going to like these men and writing this like love song. So people go, oh, your child. And I go, oh, yeah, my dog.
It was about a dog.
It was about my dog.
I love that. And isn't it so much the case that our animals are a training ground for
I need to ask you some questions before we run out of time.
Okay, fine.
I'm aware that this might be on the internet, and the number one question I get asked, because the fandom is real, is we have to sort the founders into Hogwarts houses.
Okay, because obviously I'm Hermione, I like had to plan this out. I have it on paper.
All your questions being solved, kids. You can thank me on the Twitter.
Okay, so it was very difficult for me to sort Eliza and Angelica, and
And by the way, none of this like half this, half this.
No.
Like if you're doing that, you're cheating. You have to live in one house.
It's true. You can't live in 2 houses. 1 house. So I had initially put Eliza in Ravenclaw and Angelica in Gryffindor, and then I decided to switch them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think Eliza would be Gryffindor, and I think Angelica would be Ravenclaw. And Angelica for Ravenclaw because she's all brain. She makes that decision about Hamilton. She assesses the situation and she decides to do the smart thing rather than follow her heart.
Yeah.
Whereas Angelica, to me, just feels like all heart, all courage. So that was why I did that.
Awesome. Who else you got?
I've got Aaron Burr, who is obviously Slytherin. Just all ambition.
When you reply to this on Twitter, please just put the gif of her raising her hand in the movie. That would be the appropriate thing.
That would be the appropriate thing. Oh, me, I have the answers. I know. Yeah, so Aaron Burr, Slytherin. He's Switzerland, just waiting on the sidelines.
You said there was a case to be made.
There was a case to be made. There was a case to be made for Hufflepuff. I love it. And there's a case because I feel like as a young man, if Aaron could have grown or developed, or like he could have, but he kind of, he could have developed, but he didn't. So Slytherin. He could have gone in Hufflepuff's direction, but didn't. Hamilton. Gryffindor.
Yeah.
For me, he's all authenticity, all courage, all authentic.
And I will tell you the one thing that backs your argument, and then I'll tell you what your co-star said, which was different, was that in as a soldier, his nickname was the Little Lion, which is the Gryffindor.
This makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but I asked Daniel Radcliffe when he came to the show. I said, "So please sort Hamilton into a house." And he went, "Ravenclaw, definitely."
Why though?
Like that quickly.
But why?
I don't know. I know he said.
Call him about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask him that. Okay. Well, I have to ask you 2 very quick things.
Okay.
One quick thing. One of my favorite lines in the play is when Hamilton says to Aaron Burr, speaking of Slytherin, "If you don't stand for something, what will you fall for?"
Yeah.
And I just love that because it's so emblematic of the idea that being on the sidelines is a decision. It's not like you can just because it allows, even if what's happening around you isn't in line with your personal beliefs, by not actively standing against it, you're allowing those things to continue.
Yeah, I remember for Martin Luther King's birthday this year, I was asked to read a speech, and there was a quote that has been resonating with me even today, which is, "There is such a thing as being too late."
Yes.
There is. And that is that's something that's really true, and that's something that we play with Hamilton and Burr. In terms of when do you act, when do you keep your opinions to yourself?
Yeah, when do you keep your cards close to your chest?
Hamilton couldn't help himself.
He couldn't. And he wears his heart on his sleeve like I do. Where I have
and the tragedy in the way we tell it is the time Burr acts and Hamilton doesn't, one kills the other. They're not static over the course of the show. They change. Like Burr becomes more in his expression for power and his expression for political mobility. Yeah. He becomes more Hamiltonian, and Hamilton through tragedy sort of retreats.
Yeah. Do you see yourself in Hamilton?
I see myself in all of them. I see myself in Angelica. It was great fun being Angelica. I mean, the fun of writing is you get to be all of them.
You get to be everyone. You get to be all the characters.
Some of these songs, that would be enough. I'll tell you another very personal story. I wrote that song, probably the fastest song I wrote for the show. I wrote it in 45 minutes. Eliza needed to say it. I had another song I was trying to write, and then I was like, Eliza needs to say this now. And I wrote that song, and I played it for my wife, tears running down my face. And she looked at me because she is not in the business, and she goes, "Oh, is that what you wish I would say to you?"
Is that what you wish I would say to you?
And I go, "No, it's what I say to you." I mean, it's actually my letter to her. So HeForShe.
Okay, that's amazing. Everyone should read the lyrics to that song. Okay.
But yeah, that's actually my love letter to my wife.
That makes me like you a lot. That's great. I'm gonna go listen to that after this and just cry. So So, other than this, I have to ask, you're an amazing freestyler.
Yes.
You can just do this.
You're an amazing beatboxer. This is great.
He's lying. He's lying. I'm okay.
Well, what I said was, I'm happy to freestyle if you beatbox.
If I beatbox. Okay, but show me how. What am I doing?
Okay, well, first let's just see. No instruction.
Oh no.
Just from what you've seen. I know you've seen a lot of
is gonna be
beatboxing.
bad.
I'm sure they were beatboxing on set during those movies. Every young man tries it.
English school
a lot
kids.
Of young
That's
women
what we
try to
do
it.
all the time.
Yeah.
We just beatbox.
Right.
Okay, this is gonna be so bad.
It's gonna be awesome.
Do I cover my mouth?
Yeah, just
that
for my
okay?
sake. Yeah.
I do this just so I don't spit at you?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's sort of
great.
like the spit guard.
This is gonna be so embarrassing.
Okay,
Okay.
what am I freestyling about?
Gender equality.
Fantastic.
It's International Women's Day. It's HeForShe.
Yeah.
Gender equality. Feminism. Are you a feminist?
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, back to this.
We can talk to
We can talk in a minute. Okay, so what kind of beat do you want? Slow or fast?
whatever you got.
This is gonna be bad. Okay.
This is gonna be amazing.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Yo, it's Lin, and I have to laugh. How can we not be equal? We're like half. Like women are like half of the people on Earth. And yes, they should have been equal since birth. That means all day, every day, equal pay, every way. Okay, are we really okay? Oh my gosh. Yo, this beatboxing's fantastic. Beasts, where to find them. Yo, I'm drastically changing the narrative. Look at it. You kept going. And oh my gosh, I love watching this keep flowing. Holy cow. This is such a meme. Thank you. This is the Beatbox Dream Team.
I'm so embarrassed right now.
Wait,
I'm literally the color of like a tomato. I'm so red. That was amazing.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was the best ever.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, I love you. Thank you.
Beatboxing.
Everyone go see the play. And no one ever asked me to do that ever again. These are the lengths that I will go to for gender equality.